everybody. Welcome to another episode of Faithful Friday. Today I have the unique opportunity to interview one of the main heroes of disabled advocating for disabled people in several different ways. And we'll discuss it right now. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Debbie. It's good to be here with you.
You're exchange. Could you tell a little bit about it and what inspired you and your husband to create it?
To create Luke 14 Exchange? Sure. My husband, Jerry, has cerebral palsy. He was born with that and uses a power wheelchair. And both in each of our single lives as well as in our married life, we've always worked in the field of disability, working either in residential programs, camping programs, church ministries, advocacy. We've done lots of different things over the years. And when we moved to Florida about 4 years ago, we didn't feel like God was done with us yet, but we weren't sure what was next. And Jerry in particular realized that his passion has always been to mentor people with disabilities. He looks around and says, who's going to be the next disability leaders when I'm no longer, not that he's the only leader, but when he and others of our era are no longer around to be those leaders, who's going to be there? He saw the keen need for the church to have more people with disabilities in leadership. So we decided that that was God's call to focus our time on mentoring and coaching and developing leaders among people with disabilities. And then, because my passion is caregivers, also coming alongside families and caregivers and building them up.
What is your mission of Luke 42 Exchange? What is Luke 1 Exchange, and what is the reference about?
Sure. And actually, let me just clarify. It's Luke 14 Exchange, 1-4 there. But what we do is we coach Christian communities. And by Christian communities, we mean not only churches, but businesses or organizations run by Christians as well. So we coach Christian communities and we mentor people affected by disability and encourage their families until the table, God's table, is full. And that's where the Luke 14 story comes in. It's a parable that Jesus gave in the New Testament where he tells about a banquet master who has sent out invitations to come to a big banquet. And of course, back in Bible times, they didn't have refrigerators. So the invitations went out to say, we're going to be doing this in a couple weeks. Can you come? People would say yes or no. And then when the time was ready, when the food was prepared and about to be served, the servant would go out again and say, okay, those of you who said yes, now's the time to come. Well, when the servant went out the second time, people who said yes, they were going to come, now came up with excuses. They just got married, they had a new oxen they had to figure out, all different kinds of excuses. And so the banquet master said, well, I've got all this food, then you go out into the highways and byways and you compel, you make people come in because I want my table full. I've got all this prepared for them. And of course, that parable is about God's house, God's banquet.
God's preparing, God's accepting anyone to the table.
That's right. And I love that word compel in the story because it's not just that he accepts them, but he says, you go out there and compel them to come in, make them. So we need to make a walk with Jesus Christ and Christianity so appealing to people that they just want to come in.
And you do this in 3 different areas. Outreach for churches, like you just discussed, disability camps, and personal mentoring. Could you go into detail about those a little bit more?
Sure, and I'm going to add just one more thing onto the church side. So churches who want to know how to work with people with disabilities, we're glad for them to give us a call or email us and we can help them work through their challenges. But we know that many, though God wants people with disabilities in his church and family, many people with disabilities feel rejected by the church. So that's why we also look to see Christian businesses and organizations, because sometimes we have to take a backdoor approach to getting people with disabilities into the house of God.
Yeah, because
So,
sometimes they believe that the disability is because God rejected them, when in reality they really didn't.
you're right. That is one of the prevailing thoughts. And so oftentimes somebody with a disability will maybe have a boss or a coworker or a membership in an organization where we can first begin to reach out to them, and then as the relationships get developed there, then bring them into the church. So that's our kind of dual focus on Christian outreaches. So camps, we have always been involved in camping, and camping is just fun. And when we were younger, it was tent camping and exploring. Nowadays, we're happy with conference centers for our camps. But we work with one of the other things we do in general is Jerry and I, you can see from my gray hair, Jerry's about my age too. We've got some similar, we've got some long life experience in these fields. And so we wanted to take our experience and support other organizations doing things, but knowing that we don't have the energy anymore to be the director of the camp and run everything from registration to closing it up at the end of the week and taking the midnight calls and all the rest. So we lend our years of experience to people who have that younger energy. So in doing that, we work with Lift Disability Ministry for a camp here in Florida called Breakaway. And we work with another organization that's also called Luke 14 Ministries, but is not us. And they're in Tennessee. And together we do Camp Celebrate. And both of those camps are for people who have disabilities, but also their family members. So the typical siblings come, parents, spouses, whoever it might be. And we just have a ball of fun. It's one of those places where when somebody meets me and they say, so who's your husband? Normally in church, I can say, oh, he's the guy over there in the wheelchair, because he's the only one. But at this camp, if I say the guy over there in the wheelchair, they're going to go, so which one? Because there's 10 or 15 of them over there.
And so people feel more accepted because they're not alone in there.
Exactly. Yeah, people understand the journey they've been through. People tell us it's like a slice of heaven to go to camp for the whole family. People get it, and they're willing to you can really have great dialogue and just also some really fun experiences together. And then, so in the camps, we do different things. Jerry is the camp pastor at one of them. I assist with some of the women's ministries at the other camp, or a family chaplain liaison sort of role. And then mentoring is, as I had mentioned, and you did too, Debbie, one of our big focuses, mentoring and coaching people. And we do that both in one-on-one situations, talking. Jerry has 4 or 5 guys that he meets with almost weekly by Zoom. They're all over the country, and they walk through steps of what does it look like as a man to deal with your disability in the workplace? How do you answer questions? When do you answer questions about certain things? How do you deal with the anger that often is a part of many people's disability and still honor Christ? So he's doing all different things depending on where these gentlemen are in their relationships with God and with their community, and mentoring and coaching them along. Some of these guys say, Jerry's the only one I've ever known who has my disability and who's worked all of his life and can tell me how to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, even when I worked that one time, the problem with Social Security is that they don't allow you to make enough money so you can support yourself. And when you do that, Social Security is taken away, and that's a whole other issue that we won't discuss. We won't discuss it here today, but that's another issue.
Debbie, that is so important. I'm glad that even though we can't discuss it a lot today, you raised that, because we've been dealing with that with a couple specific individuals a lot over the last few weeks. And I think one of the things from what you said, it's important for people in the church and the community to know it's not just an easy answer to tell Debbie or Jerry or somebody else, go get a job. While there may be plenty of jobs out there, like Debbie said, there's a lot of challenges with other pieces of it to fit together. And so, yeah, just be careful that you're encouraging people to go do something that you don't really know what all the ramifications will be.
And like I said, there were a lot of ramifications after I had that job.
Yeah. And then Debbie, also, I was going to say on the mentoring, so it's not just 4 or 5 people. We have a bunch of others, but those are kind of weekly people that Jerry's working with. But then we also do some group mentoring, and Debbie, you know about one of those specifically, and that's page 42, which is a group for writers like Debbie and a few others who have disabilities. I've been in many writers critique groups. I write myself, and found that the speed that those groups move at could be really difficult for some people with disabilities who need a little more time to process or to communicate. And so I was really thrilled when Word Weavers International was willing to partner with us at Luke 14 Exchange to put together the first, as far as we know, Christian critique group for writers with disabilities.
So you're basically the one that started it? I didn't even know. I thought it was Luke. Your Word Weavers, sorry.
Well, Word Weavers it's under the auspices and leadership of Word Weavers. I've been a president with them in other groups, so I just asked to step away from the other presidency I was in and take the presidency of this group to be able to initiate and get it going. So they were all for the idea. They just didn't know how to do it, and they said, "If you know how to do it and you can put it together, go for it." So
it's actually worked out. It's actually worked out pretty well.
It has been. It's a good group, and I've seen all the writers, including myself, grow through the time in the group because we each have different strengths that we point out and share with one another.
But as well as helping others, you mentioned earlier that disability is part of your daily life. It also affects your personal life as well. You and Jerry met, and can you explain how you met and how you decided to start a relationship with each other?
Sure. This is one of the fun stories to always be able to tell. And we love to tell people we're not just a client, we're a family. We get there, we're not just an employee, we're a family. We understand this. But Jerry and I met back, we can't remember the exact year, but it was sometime in the late 80s at a conference that was called the Christian Council on Persons with Disabilities. That organization no longer exists, but it was started to try to bring all of these small disability ministries around the country together to have strength in numbers. And so we were both at a conference in Wisconsin, and I kind of remember him. There were 40 people there. He doesn't remember me at all. I made a real impression, right? But I mean, there was no romantic thoughts on my side. I just remembered meeting this guy. Then the next year, we were in Michigan for the conference, and there were 1,000 people there. And out of 1,000, he remembers me. Crazy how he couldn't remember me out of 40, but that's okay. And so we just became friends. There was a group of single people who went to the conference every year. So once a year, we'd meet up face to face at the conference, and after the sessions were over, we'd go play a game of Uno or do something or run out for some coffee. And after about 6 years of that, Jerry called me at home for the first time instead of talking to me at the office where we would periodically talk other times. And so I thought, he didn't declare any intentions, or I didn't know he had any feelings for me, but it was just a different kind of conversation. And I remember getting off the phone that night and saying, God, if this relationship is from you and there's to be any future in it, I'm going to keep my hands off it because I've ruined relationships by being in charge, and that's not your plan for me. And over time, Jerry would continue to call me just every maybe few weeks or month, and we'd talk at home. And then when I'd feel like I wanted to talk to him, I didn't have his home number. I would ask God, could you have Jerry call tonight? And sure enough, Jerry would call. And then finally, after several months, he said, why don't you ever call me? And I said, well, you never gave me your number. And he said, you could have asked me. And I said, I figured when you were ready, you would give it to me. And so he did. And then he welcomed me to call him. And our phone calls, I was living in California. He was living in Indiana. So not only were we long distance, but we were across three different time zones. And so when it would be a great time for me to talk, he'd already be in bed or vice versa. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a little crazy on our calls. And then once a month, one of us would try to fly to the other's location and meet friends and family and that sort of thing. And then we laughingly say, not in the way the phrase was used when I was younger, but we had to get married. But by that we mean because we couldn't afford the phone bills anymore. At the time we were doing long distance dating, we paid for every phone call. We paid for every bite of email. And then we paid, of course, for the airline tickets and places to stay while we were visiting the other. So we decided then in '95 to get married. We were engaged in the spring and we got married that November. So, yeah.
Weren't you nervous about getting involved with someone with a disability? Why or why not?
You know, the funny thing is, we talked very little about disability during our time of dating or engagement. Now, looking back on it, that's crazy. But because we both, well, I had worked in the field for so long, and he had lived and worked in the field for so long. At that point, we were both in our late 30s. I think we just kind of assumed each other knew what was going to be involved from our perspectives. And so it really, there were some things that were a bit of a surprise because it was different caregiving for my husband now than it was caregiving for the person in the group home who I was getting up, they'd go off to school and I'd go home then and come back. So there were some changes, but we didn't talk about it. It didn't make me nervous. I just figured I've always had perhaps a more than a healthy dose, so maybe it's a little bit of a challenge that God and I have to work through often, but of self-confidence that, you know what, I can do this. And I think that's the attitude I entered marriage with, and Jerry did too, and we figured it out as we've gone.
As you said, the roles between caregiver and wife are different. Can you explain how you manage that and if Jerry has any other caregivers?
How I manage it sometimes isn't always good. Sometimes I don't manage it very well, but then other times I try to remember that it's like a constant juggling game. But I can't juggle at all. But if I can, maybe I would say I could juggle 3 balls at a time. But there are 12 things today that, or this week at least, I feel like that have to get done. But if I can only keep 3 going, what do I do with these others? So instead of feeling guilty about things I'm not getting done and stressing about them, I try to consciously say, these are the 3 balls I'm going to pick up today and do. And I'm going to get these 3 things done. Tomorrow or next week, I'm probably going to put these down and I'll have to pick up the ball of laundry because now I haven't done laundry for 2 weeks. So I better do some laundry, but I'll put aside balancing our checkbook or whatever it might be. So it's choosing which things each day I can balance and trying not to feel guilty, though I'm not always successful. Letting go of some things. But you know, when I get my head and my heart on straight with God, that's a daily thing. Then it's also a privilege to be both Jerry's caregiver and his wife, because after my relationship with God, Jerry really is my #1 priority. And so getting to spend time with him and help him is really a great way to serve God in the role he's given me. But you also asked about other caregivers. That's been seasonal sort of thing in our life. We've lived in Florida now 4 years. Jerry doesn't have any other regular caregivers here other than me. But when I've been sick, or Jerry really tries to get me a long weekend away at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, just to get a break.
Wow.
He'll arrange, he talks to some of the guys in the men's Bible study at church and says, hey, I really feel like Joan needs to get away for a break. Would you be willing to help me with my care? And he explains exactly what that means. Some of the guys have said yes, others have said no, and that's okay. But they'll come and do a couple days so I can get a break. So that's really helpful. When we lived in up north before in Pennsylvania, when he did that for a weekend getaway, some of the guys afterwards said, well, I could keep doing this once a week. I'll come every Tuesday morning and get you up if you'd like. So we have had periods of time where we've had other caregivers for extended periods, but currently we have them on a as needed kind of long weekend basis.
What is the daily routine with Jerry? Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Our day starts with telling Alexa to snooze the alarm 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Because we are not morning people, neither one of us. So we strive to get up at a regular time. And then, so for us, that means I get Jerry out. I get up first, get myself slightly together, and then I go to get Jerry out of bed. We have a ceiling lift in our bedroom. And so that's very helpful. I put a sling around his body and then lower the ceiling lift, and it raises him from bed and then puts him in his shower chair in the mornings. And then he'll go in and he can do most of his routines in getting himself prepared on his own. It depends if he's running short on time or if his strength is particularly low that day. I may help him with some things.
With
But
CP, it's a day-to-day like struggle. What you can do might be different one day. What you can't. It's like it depends on whether your arm really wants to.
exactly. Yeah, you know that routine there. And then when he's done there, then I'll bring him back over, put him back in the ceiling lift, lay him back down in bed where I can then put his clothes on him, and then one more time in the lift to get him back over into his wheelchair now, where he can then propel himself on his own, of course, with the power wheelchair around the house. When I say I put his clothes on him, one of our I hope you've picked up, and you probably have, Debbie, that we both really enjoy humor. And so one of the statements that we often say is, Jerry wears the pants in our family just as soon as I put them on him.
Yeah, that's funny.
It is kind of funny. So, and then he's able, our work is in it from our home right now, still. And so he goes to his office and he, like you, he uses voice activation. He can do that. He still finds, probably like you would find too, nothing's still as good, even voice activation, as the human hand. People can still type for him faster and more accurately than what he can voice.
Or write notes.
Or write notes.
Okay. Yeah.
So he tries not to call me to help him with that too much. We do have an executive assistant who helps him with a lot of that and some other volunteers. But I will help him some with his work if he needs it. Always my ear is attuned because things drop a lot, as I'm sure you've experienced as well.
Or you need help. Yeah.
Or something's just out of reach. So I'll often, do you need help with that? And and he'll tell me yes or no, and we'll do that. And then I do get him his for the most part, get meals. He sometimes will do something if it's a frozen kind of thing. But otherwise, I think throughout the day, it's primarily what I would think of as a typical family relationship where you're just kind of doing things around the house. And then in the evening, it's kind of the reverse of the morning, using the ceiling lift to get him in and out of bed and to take care of his personal needs there, and off to La La Land to sleep again.
What encourage as we kind of close here? What encouragement would you give to all the caregivers out there, or the caregivers that are burnt out? Can you say something to them, or just your personal advice?
I can. Yeah. Can I include a brief commercial to start, and then I do have some words I'd like to share to caregivers. But later this year, I wish I could tell you the exact month, but it's getting very close to finishing. But I have a book that will come out this year called The Third Wheel: Embracing the Beauty of a Marriage Affected by Disability. So when that comes out, I'll be promoting it through Luke 14 Exchange and my own personal sites, and I'll let Debbie know, and she can maybe share it with her listeners here. But so I would say one thing is to look for that, because there's going to be a lot of good feedback in that to answer some of those questions. But I think what caregivers who are feeling discouraged or lonely need to know is you are not alone. You might feel like you're alone, but you are never alone. God sees you. and he loves you deeply. Even if the person you're providing care for acts like they don't see you or they don't care, God sees you and he cares. So thank you for allowing him to work through your hands and feet to serve the person that he's given you their life to. And, you know, even if after you hear me say that, you go, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm still alone, or I don't understand how God sees me. Please reach out to me or reach out to Debbie and she can put you in touch with me. But we have a website, luke14exchange.org, and it's 14. So Luke, Luke 14 exchange.org. And we have a couple different places on there where you can fill out for information and say you'd like somebody to contact you. Please do that. I would love to call you or to talk or to listen to you or email or whatever it might be. So you're not alone out there. Connect with another caregiver. We need each other.
And the same goes for the disabled community, because we do, especially I have realized most of my caregivers on my hands, I wouldn't be as independent as I am without them. So the same goes for the disabled community. But what would you say to the disabled community out there, who is looking for community and feel alone, but needs somebody to come alongside them and walk through this life?
Yeah, that's a huge need. And I would say I understand from the position I can as a wife and as a disability ministry professional that it's hard. It's hard to do that. And you even know it's harder than I know. And it stinks that the people with disabilities have to be the ones to often open the door to things people realize they need to. So I would say it's putting on some thick skin, or sometimes I like to say, I pretend that I'm coating myself with Pam spray every morning so that the things that people say that used to irritate me or would make me mad just slide right off me and I don't pay attention to them.
Because sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes
Exactly.
it has to do with the circumstances, or they're stressed out, and then you need to pray for them because you know they're stressed out. And
Jerry and I have often been called pioneers. People will say, well, you're a pioneer doing this, doing that. And, you know, it's like, yeah, people go, oh, isn't that cool? Well, you know, the pioneers were the ones who got shot at on their way to the destination. And so you, even today, any of my friends listening with disabilities, we're still pioneering. You're still pioneering, getting out there and making pathways and making life accessible. And it's hard, but continue on. But again, don't do it alone. You are just as welcome to reach out through our website. And we know people who work in disability services all across the country. So we can help you connect, hopefully, with somebody close by you and do it together. We really do need each other.
that's why part of the reason why I'm so focused on the disabled community, because I've been there. I mean, yes, I need someone older than me to walk through the years that I'm going to walk through, but I've been there, so I want to mentor people younger, my age, that are going through the same thing I have. And that's why I'm making my blog, my website, or way people can reach out and hear the word of God.
Amen, Debbie. That is so critical. And thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. I know it's not always easy for you, but people need to know they're not alone.
Yeah. It looks like we have 7 minutes. So, anything else you would like to end with, your Instagram or your website again? just in case they didn't have time to write it down.
Okay, sure. And I'm not currently using Instagram. For the ministry, we have the website, Luke 14, the number is 14. You can see them on my shirt here, Luke14exchange.org. That's our website. We are also on Facebook, both as a group and a page. So look up Luke 14 Exchange and you'll find us there. Personally, I'm on Facebook, primarily, a little bit on Twitter, and under just Joan Borton, Joan Morris Borton, and but you'll find me through Luke 14 as well. And then I have a personal blog that needs to be updated a bit. You're welcome to go look at it. It's joanborton.com. But just know I've got a little bit of work to do on it to get it up to speed before my book comes out.
Don't we all?
Yes, it's a constant
I'm
work.
still working on my book, that is. But yeah. Again, thank you. I hope people really reach out to you, because we all need community to get through this life. I mean, yes, God is number one and he will always be there for us, but disabled people need to stick together and be there for each other, because nobody else understands quite like we do. I'm not doing that to be rude, but that's the truth, because nobody understands what we go through on a daily basis, how we think. It's like most of the battle is mental.
Yes.
So thank you for opening up the world to the disabled community a little bit more. I will post your stuff in the bottom after this goes live, and thank you. And like I always say to my fellow watchers out there, I love you, but God loves you more. See you next time on Music Monday. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
All righty.